So for my last video, what I did is I ranked every booster box in the Pokemon SV era for Poké investing purposes, and after looking back on it, I feel like the main problem that I have with that video is that it was based purely off of vibes, and I don't really think that we want to do that here. I think that we want to look at the numbers, and so that's what we're going to do today is we're going to go by the numbers, which boxes have actually performed the best. And before we get started, I think one of the key differences is going to be that the last video was for long term, like what do you want to hold for 3 to 5 years, and I think for this video we're just going to look at like what the latest like price movement kind of looks like, and I think 7 days is probably a little bit too granular, so I'd rather take a look at like the 30 days. So just starting to take a look, I think that one of the things that immediately stands out is Paldean Fates is our top performer, and I don't think this is surprising. I think that this is something that we sort of predicted. We saw that 151 had gone parabolic and had explosive price growth, and Paldean Fates really sits into the same niche. It's a specialty set that was printed forever, had no like desirability, and then sort of has just blown up since then. So it really doesn't surprise me at all that for the last month this is caught back up. I think Destined Rivals is another one that wouldn't catch anybody by surprise. Something that's been shocking is that there haven't been reprints of this set. I think everybody's been waiting on it, and if anything, that's probably the reason the price hasn't even exploded even more. I think it's really just that as time goes on, people become more and more jaded, which has been really interesting. People have, I think, started to lose faith that we're ever going to see a reprint, and honestly, I don't know. I sort of think that it aligns with the Pokemon Company's like strategy where they just don't seem interested in reprinting booster boxes because they want these to be investable. And I think that if they don't reprint these, like this is really just going to catch everybody by surprise. Like I don't think people saw this coming even a little bit. So still a great buy. I think we had it at the top of the list with our last one. Black Bolt and White Flare, I think another two that I don't think people would be too surprised to see up here at the top. I think that their price has been stable for so long. They came out at around $100. I think they dropped to like 80 for a little bit. Yeah, it looks like we've just started to like tick back upward. So I think ultimately, if we look really long term, these sets will probably underperform just because they're not too popular. Like it's not a very like hot gen of Pokemon, but I think that in like the era that we're in with like everything being hyper investable, this being a set that doesn't have booster boxes, a specialty set, like I think it'll ultimately still perform well, but I think right now it's just kind of like catching back up to the market. And then Temporal is actually one that's really interesting to me. I think that Temporal is a set that sort of has like a cult following, if you will. I don't think it's a top tier set. I think that it had a lot of like I don't know. It had a lot of problems when it first came out, and it's not something that, I really enjoy, but there is like a niche for it, which is really interesting because that niche actually ends up like making it sort of investable. And like I still think that long term will underperform, but again, it's a booster box from the SV like block, which is proven to be insanely popular. So, yeah, it's also I would just sort of have the thesis that it's catching up to the market. And with that, that wraps up our S tier. Going down to A, I think Shrouded Fable is really interesting. We can see that even though it's had a lot of upward price motion, that it's still trading at $100 in ETB, which, for a set that came out a while ago, is definitely underperforming, like, pretty much everything else on this list. It's something just that's been lagging the market and is probably catching up a bit, so still probably wouldn't hold it long term. Paldea Evolved is a huge one. Paldea Evolved has proven to be like one of the breakout like hit sets from the SV era. I think that the odds of us getting any sort of reprint at this point are pretty much zero, and I think that this is easily just going to be $1,000 booster box. So if you don't have a position in Paldea Evolved, that's really one I would open up. The 151 ETB is also not a surprise. I think it's only up this amount because it had bid moving up so like violently that this is just kind of capturing the tail end. So this is just a little bit of the price appreciation and maybe cooling off a little bit, which makes sense when you have like an ETB that sold for $40 at release trading for over 600. So probably much needed like cooling off. B tier I think has some solid sets. Paradox Rift I'm not a huge fan of, but Stellar I think is incredibly underrated. I love the cards in Stellar. Twilight Masquerade also has been hyper unrelated. One of the biggest things that Twilight has going for it is that it's just a good set. It was kind of the set that ignited the fire of the SV block. Before that we had Temporal Forces and Paradox Rift that people didn't really love, and Twilight was it was the first one that was actually like good. The Greninja was a huge chase, and I think the Eevee, the Chansey, like just a bunch of good cards. So unsurprising to me that it continues to just like slowly creep upward. Obsidian is one that I think has been interesting because it wasn't really well received at release, but has been honestly like a top performer, interestingly enough. So I don't know if it's just the Charizard tax kind of kicking in or maybe lack of supply, but yeah, Obsidian Flames probably also a solid B tier pick. I think that's sort of where we had it. And then heading down to our C tier, we have SV Base, Surging Sparks, and Journey Together. And these are sort of interesting because I think SV Base will continue to age well, but it doesn't surprise me that it's mostly flat to slightly negative. It looks like it was moving upward and then just kind of regressed. So not real like negative motion, just more sideways. Surging Sparks is one that has been sideways for forever, so totally unsurprising. And then Journey Together, yeah, also just sideways price motion. And then D tier is really funny because it's actually the Prismatic ETB, and I think this is really funny because Prismatic is clearly one of the best sets and outperforms like all of these things that are above it, but just, where it's regressed. And I think that's when you start to get into the place of like, when you're looking at really short term, this is where it makes investing really hard. And this is why I would always advocate for holding things for like the long term. You never really know where things are going to move. I think what we're seeing with Prismatic is really this is just like price cooldown. Interestingly, it looks like we're even like a little behind. So this data only updates like once every 24 hours. So when you see more like violent swings, it's not really going to capture those like immediately. So you kind of need to keep an eye on it. But yeah, we saw like this massive, massive blow up. So in the last 3 months, we're still almost like doubling in price, and we're just kind of falling off of the peak, which is just the price motion that things tend to have. People come in, they want to take their profits, and they want to exit. So this is the place where I would honestly advocate for a buy. I think that when you see like something in D tier like this that has moved like negatively, which is clearly a great set, I think that's just like your biggest indicator. This is sort of, if anything, this is just a massive buy signal for what's really a great set. I don't know. I think that the tier list actually, like, this is really interesting and provides a lot of value. I think that if I were looking for buys, I think that kind of capturing things at the bottom and top, I think are always the best move. You kind of want to, you want to take the winners and you want to let them ride. So I think even buying things that have seen a lot of upward price motion can be a good strategy, and then kind of capturing the things at the bottom. Where I'd be careful is stuff that kind of sits in the middle. These tend to like, stagnate a bit and, really just not give the same return. So I hope that was interesting. I think the tier list has been really neat. And yeah, this is something that I'll continue to check back.